Joanna Newsom. Yes. Ease. Is. Ease. 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 So you know I'm a huge fan of Richard Dawson. I was originally going to take a significant portion of this video to explain why Joanna Newsom reminds me of Richard Dawson. It's not like they're interchangeable. Like, Joanna Newsom isn't like the female version of Richard Dawson. They're just kind of cataloged in the same area of my brain due to the similarities in songwriting and performance styles. But enough about Richard Dawson, right? And I want to preface this whole video by saying that I know that Joanna Newsom has a very dedicated and passionate fan base, which is warranted. However, I'm not claiming to be like a mega fan of her music. I'm more of like a passive bystander that really enjoys a good bit of what I've heard from her. Honestly, the first time I listened to Joanna Newsom, I wasn't really digging it. It was back in 2010 when her album Have One On Me came out. Didn't really like her vocal delivery. I found it a little bit grating, honestly. And the album is super long for someone who isn't totally into the style of music on there. Probably not the best starting point, to be honest. And my musical tastes were different back then. That was 10 years ago. I'm not completely different. I mean, I still like a lot of the music that I liked 10 years ago, but my interests back then were a little bit more closed off. I revisited her music in 2015 with the release of her album Divers. I wasn't totally in love with it, but I thought it was pretty interesting. At this point, I still somehow hadn't listened to Ease, despite it being arguably her most notable album. But I did, obviously, and it has a special place representing a couple of really important aspects that improved the way that I listen to music. The first has to do with interpretation of lyrics. Joanna's lyrics on this album and on the rest of her albums really tend to be a little bit esoteric. The general intent of the songs can be determined without too much issue, but deciphering her obscure metaphors and her obscure phrasing is something that I really struggled with. And actually, for this video, I spent a great deal of time going line by line through the lyrics of this album, trying to get to the bottom of what Joanna was talking about. Here's the thing though, Joanna doesn't like revealing the true meaning of her music, and my ability to read minds is average at best. Her lyrics are so personal that I honestly feel like I would literally need to be Joanna Newsom herself in order to fully understand. Or maybe I'm just too dumb to understand it, and that's cool, that's fine. But that's still a brick wall. Historically, I've had this issue with certain works of art being open to interpretation. My thought process being the creator of this work had something specific in mind when they created it, and I need to know that in order to enjoy the art correctly or whatever. Like, I didn't trust myself to apply meaning to something that I didn't create myself or something that I didn't know the full intent of, which is kind of a flawed way of consuming art, I guess, but that's just kind of how my brain's wired. But my point is that this album basically forces me to find meaning using other methods. You know, I don't have the literal meaning behind the lyrics, but the lyrics make me feel things. And that's where the meaning is, for me at least. You know, I don't really fully understand it, but, you know, I can draw on a brick wall and make a picture for myself, and there's value in that. So I guess my advice would be to try to avoid being intimidated by works that, you know, seem too complex or esoteric or whatever. You can still get worth out of that. There's no wrong way to go about music appreciation. And the second thing I want to touch on has less to do with the content of the album and more to do with personal tastes and how fluid they can be. So like I said, I was sort of put off by Joanna Newsom's music the first few times I heard it. However, her music did end up clicking with me later on down the road, and now I enjoy a lot of her stuff. And her music hasn't changed. Duh. I've changed. Basically, don't avoid revisiting music or anything really that didn't really hit you well the first time or even the first several times it was presented to you. And in that same vein, don't feel too weird if you lose interest in music that you used to hold in high regard. There are too many variables in play to think that musical interests will be static forever. Ease obviously isn't the only album that represents these two concepts to me, but it's a really good personal example, and I've been listening to it a lot lately. The album art here is really cool. It's really classical. It's like a Renaissance painting full of symbolism alluding to the influences present on the album. First, you'll notice Joanna herself as the primary subject of the art. She's dressed rather lavishly, with a flower wreath alluding to success and celebration. She's the center of attention. In addition to the flowers surrounding her, there's some sort of skull in the top right of the album, like a ram skull or something. I'm not really sure what it is. If any skull experts are watching, thanks. Also, let me know what kind of skull that is. She's holding a sickle, which I think represents like hard labor, and there's a little moth in a display case that she's holding. This kind of reminds me of those 4-H entomology projects. I don't know how many people have had experience with those, but I always loved looking at those things. They're a little morbid, I guess, but bugs are pretty cool to look at. I think the moth represents evolution since there are multiple distinct stages in a caterpillar's life. The fact that it isn't a butterfly is probably significant. I feel like butterflies are definitely the more obvious choice for representing evolution. Butterflies are vibrant and delicate, while moths are like dusty and they smack into light bulbs. The moth might represent realistic imperfection amidst personal growth. The beautiful and sprawling landscape outside is obscured by a crow. Now, I'm a big fan of crows. I love them. They get kind of a bad rap, at least in art. Unfortunately, they usually represent some bad stuff, like death. The fact that this crow is in the way of the wondrous imagery outside is a little bit ominous, isn't it? So if I've interpreted this album cover correctly, and obviously I have, we can expect a very personal artistic statement with classical influences, with very dark undertones and metaphors. And the album title offers a little more information as well. Ys was a mythical French city that was suddenly engulfed by the ocean after somebody accidentally opened a levee. So that's fun. This is going to be a fun album, I think. Also, check out the production credits. 3 names immediately pop out to me. Jim O'Rourke did the mixing for the album. He's known for his solo work as well as his work with bands like Wilco and folk musician Bill Callahan, who actually shows up later on the album doing backing vocals. Van Dyke Parks contributes the string arrangements for the album. His name might also ring a bell with the Beach Boys fans out there. He worked closely with Brian Wilson on the legendary but ill-fated Smile project. On Ys, he utilizes a 30-something piece orchestra. And Steve Albini is on here as the recording engineer, which is a really interesting pick. To me, he's like the opposite of Van Dyke Parks. Parks is lush and classical with kind of a tongue-in-cheek air of formality, at least in the solo works that I've heard from him. Albini is jagged and noisy. He's a pretty prolific figure in the alternative rock scene, and he's worked with the likes of Nirvana, Pixies, Nine Inch Nails, Slint, PJ Harvey, and that's just naming a few. If you aren't familiar with Steve Albini, just check out his production credits. He is seriously all over that late 80s, 90s alt-rock scene. He's also notable as a musician, being the driving force behind the very influential Big Black and Shellac. So yeah, Albini is a really interesting choice for this album, given the content, but he brings a lot of experience, and he's really good at making music sound really raw, which is an aspect of this album. And of course, the glue holding these figures together is Joanna Newsom herself, with her unusual songwriting and her lovely harp playing. She's a really good harp player, obviously. It would be weird if she wasn't, but she's like really good at the harp. If you haven't seen her perform, I definitely recommend looking up some videos of live performances. The harp is like such a pleasant instrument to watch. Joanna can play these like really complex licks while singing her weird complex melodies. It just comes off so effortless. Even if she kind of does have a habit of forgetting her lyrics sometimes. I just like watching her hands glide up and down this giant weird contraption that's sitting on her shoulder. It's quite a visual spectacle despite her sitting in one place the whole time. I've been talking for a while, I know. It turns out this album actually has songs on it too, so So right off the bat, you're introduced to Joanna's vocal delivery, which is a very notable aspect of the music. Her vocals are sort of squawky, but also kind of delicate. If I had to compare her vocals to any other vocalist, I'd say she kind of sounds like Kate Bush, but like even less conventional maybe. It's hard to describe really. It's like Kate Bush mixed with old scratchy jazz, I guess. It's definitely recognizable. And Joanna beautifully meanders around on her harp while she creates a vivid atmosphere with her lyrics. I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot. She invokes visions of various interactions with her sister, Emily, who definitely means a lot to her. Emily is an astrophysicist, and there are some notable references to celestial entities on this song. For example, Joanna mentions only being able to identify Pleiades in the night sky, which is a pretty recognizable cluster of stars that really any star noob could find. She also recites her understanding of meteors in the chorus of the song, that the meteorite is a source of the light, and the meteor is just what we see, and the meteoroid is a stone that's devoid of the fire that propelled it to thee. Actually, Joanna, a meteoroid is a small rock that's floating in space. A meteor is a meteoroid that has met an atmosphere. The subsequent friction causes the tail of light behind it. And a meteorite is a meteor that is intact after traveling through the atmosphere and has made contact with, in this case, Earth. So I fixed the song for you. It's definitely not as catchy, but it's a little more accurate and clear now. You know what's weird though? Emily is on this song doing backing vocals. And you'd think she would have said something about Joanna's misunderstanding of meteors. It's almost like Joanna's descriptions are intentionally wrong to highlight her genuine attempts to relate to her sister's interests during their childhood. Wow. Take these off. And there may have been some turmoil in their relationship as well that this song hints at, but the recurring chorus and the numerous astrological references on the song and the rest of the album are signs that Emily is still a huge influence on Joanna. And this song is super dense lyrically, which is pretty standard for Joanna's music in general. The lyrics have a really nice flow to them as well, with internal rhymes and really satisfying like syllabic transitions. I don't know exactly how to explain it. It's called euphony, cellar door type stuff, really nice sounding words. The Van Dyke Parks arrangement is also very nice. The strings gently ebb and flow in an almost unstructured way at times around Joanna's singing and plucking. Again, I think I'm going to be saying that a lot. The music on this album is pretty consistent and it's really good. Also in this song, there's a short kind of country folk passage featuring a banjo and a mouth harp while Joanna is talking about spending time with her dad at night looking at stars, which is super cute. This is a really nice song and a great opener. This song is in the style of like a folk tale about, not surprisingly, an anthropomorphic monkey and a bear who are in some sort of romantic relationship, it seems like. And I'm not the one to judge romantic interests, but I have reason to believe that this relationship isn't really healthy. At the beginning of the song, the two are being held captive in some sort of farm, living a life of unspecified hard labor, which they aren't really digging. Until one day, a bunch of horses bust out of the front gate of the farm and then proceed to die, which kind of sucks. But that gives the monkey and the bear a chance to escape the farm. Very soon after leaving the farm, the monkey starts throwing some red flags. He employs a few emotionally manipulative techniques to kind of get what he wants out of the bear. So for example, he doesn't let the bear stop to rest where the bear wants because he said he is afraid that the crows there will give away their position. Again, with the crow bashing, what's going on? Basically, the monkey is saying that the two aren't safe if they stop where the bear wants to stop, that he knows best and they should stop where he wants to. Also, the monkey's only idea for earning money to pay for shelter outside of the farm is by using the bear for the entertainment of others, which may have been the bear's role at the farm. Like, I'm kind of getting images of like those old school Russian circuses with trained bears on bicycles. So even when the bear is away from the farm's control, she still isn't free to be what she wants to be. And then when the bear goes off to a flooded cave to go for a swim and take a bath, the monkey gets angry at her. He doesn't want the bear to be clean and possibly more attractive to others. So it's pretty apparent that this is an emotionally abusive relationship that's being sort of amplified by the monkey and bear's separation from the oppressive farm. But I'm not entirely sure how the monkey was behaving before they escaped the farm. It's possible that the newfound freedom went to the monkey's head. But here's the thing. The bear doesn't come back from her bath in the cave. As she swims around in the water, she starts disintegrating. Her tattered fur falls off in clumps. This sounds really gruesome as I'm saying it, but the lyrics imply that this is a gentle process. So given the mystical, folklorish nature of this song and the cosmic references throughout the album, particularly the reference to the Big Dipper on the previous track, I think this might be an origin story for the constellation Ursa Major. The lyrics mention the bear's worn out fur having holes in it, which may represent the stars against the dark sky, represented by the dark pool of water in the cave. The insatiable shadow of the bear's former coat that's mentioned in the song is the permanent fixture in the sky, the constellation. And the bear herself, her spirit, is free to be whatever she wants to be. I'm not sure what happened with the monkey though. It doesn't really seem like he can survive on his own, and I don't think he really deserves his own peaceful transition to the sky. Although there is something called the Monkey Head Nebula, so maybe he exploded. Like the previous track, the music here is great. It's a little more up-tempo and catchy, which sort of adds to the storytelling angle of the song. Joanna wrote this story, but seriously, it sounds like she's reciting 2,000-year-old folklore. She's really killing that vibe. This song is kind of a change of pace from the last one, highlighted by the fact that it's the only song on the album without the accompaniment of a Van Dyke Parks arrangement. It's just Joanna, her harp, and her voice. The references to a long staircase, an ocean, and a tolling bell imply to me that this song is about the death of someone close to her. As the song gets going, she describes a sudden pain, possibly a physical pain. This is then followed by more pain, as she is metaphorically pushed into a tree and her ears are filled with bees. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds painful. And then even more pain as she crashes through a ceiling and a fire cuts through a meadow. So given these visceral depictions, the references to a taxidermy dove throughout the song, and the additional context granted by the song Baby Birch off her later album Divers, I believe this song is about a lost pregnancy. Which is like super heavy, yeah. That's a kind of really specific pain that I'll never have to experience directly. And I should point out that while this album is biographical in general, Joanna hasn't confirmed or denied the biographical aspect of this song song in particular. So I can only hope that on this song she's speaking from the position of a woman who can empathize with pregnancy loss rather than someone who has actually experienced it. The second part of the song seems to be regarding her relationship with presumably the father. She compares their relationship to a sandcastle on the beach, which is vulnerable to being swept away by the ocean at any given moment, which seems to be a nod to the title of the album. The trauma associated with such an unexpected loss can be more than enough to destroy a healthy relationship. But she's a woman of resolve, born of horns and thorns, as she says, and this hardship will not destroy her or her relationship. She just has to trust that her significant other has the same strength. Yeah, this song is like really emotionally draining. Maybe the next one will be more upbeat. Nope, this one is just as heart-wrenching, possibly even more so. And this song is 17 minutes long. The other tracks are pretty long as well, with the shortest being the closer at a brisk 7 minutes and 15 seconds. But none of the songs feel too long, you know what I mean? Even though the music is generally consistent throughout the album, it never seems to overstay its welcome. For me, it just shows how captivating the music is. Being 17 minutes long, naturally, there's a lot going on in this song. Joanna's got a lot to say on this one. She did an interview with Pitchfork in which she said that this song is meant to be sort of an aggregate of the themes present on the other songs here. It's sort of like the foundation the rest of the album is built on, so the length is understandable. The song is dense with flourishy language that evokes very vivid images, in my head at least. I mean, once I look up all of the obscure words and references on Google, I can basically see what she's describing. It's like she's making my brain create its own music video, which makes for a very effective narrative. The song begins with some abstract references to war. Well, actually, it begins with a squeak. Joanna squeaks before starting the song. She just kind of like squeaks like a mouse. There are other squeaking incidents on this album. Honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about them. On one hand, it's a component of her unique vocal delivery, but on the other hand, I find it kind of distracting at times. Anyway, the song begins with some abstract references to war. A hairless and blind cavalry of war machines surround the subject, who seems to be on a beach. Not looking good for this person. Luckily, this part of the song is just a dream. However, this person's significant other, which is Joanna's perspective, is woken up by all the tossing and turning and muttering. She comforts her partner and she seems happy to do it. And she seems to do it a lot, really. She talks about going down to a river to find a really specific flower to make her significant other happy, talks about cutting his hair, and otherwise putting a lot of work into supporting this person. And she dances around it lyrically through her metaphors, but I think she also feels the pressure of a physically demanding relationship. So I think one of the main points of this song is to highlight the fragility and the exhaustion associated with a relationship where one person is much more enthusiastic than the other. Here is where Bill Callahan comes into play. He pops in near the end of the song with his sort of bored, monotone vocal delivery, backing up Joanna's more eclectic vocals. He represents the other half of the relationship, the apathetic half. So it's possible that the references to war at the beginning of the song are an indication of some past trauma, which might be causing this person to act so blasé about everything. What makes Bill Callahan's appearance a little awkward is that he and Joanna were dating at the time of this recording. So like, is this song about him? They did break up shortly after this. That kind of seems like really on the nose though, right? So around this through line of her precarious relationship, Joanna throws in numerous references to influential literature and philosophy. I recognized the references to ancient Greece, but I have to thank the amateur lyrical analysts on Genius for pointing out some of the other references. Works of poetry and literature and all that. A lot of that went way over my head, and kind of just hammered in this idea that there is simply too much context I'm missing out by not literally being Joanna Newsom. And that's making talking about this song really difficult for me. I know I don't have the full picture here. All I can do is make my best educated guess, and I'm kind of nervous about doing that, so it's a little intimidating, you know? Anyway, the music is great. I'm actually getting some Eastern vibes during the middle part of the song. After a cheeky reference to Sisyphus, who is a Greek dude who eternally pushes a rock up a mountain, the strings come in with some mallet percussion, and it sounds like Japanese or something with that kind of like recognizable pentatonic framework. Further to that point, I think this song features my favorite instrumental arrangement on the album. There's so many different instruments that pop in and out at various times as Joanna glides through this epic song's numerous segments. Obviously, there are the strings and the previously mentioned mallet percussion, but I'm also hearing various horns and woodwinds, an accordion, a banjo, and a bass guitar at certain points of the song. And the instrumentation seems so unpredictable, but it all sounds like it belongs exactly where it is, if that makes sense. Van Dyke Parks really nailed this one. And here we are at the final track of the album. Following the long, wandering journey that was the previous track, Joanna treats us to what is arguably the poppiest track on the album. It's not like a straightforward pop song, but it does utilize verse, chorus, and bridge, and what have you. And it ends up being quite a gratifying and effective way to close out this otherwise otherworldly album. There's a pre-chorus featuring a really catchy and almost shreddy harp lick right before Joanna comes in with, "And all those lonely nights down by the river." I really like it. The chorus here is one of my favorite parts of the album. And that might come off as kind of a cop-out, you know, like the most approachable and straightforward part of the album is also my favorite part. But honestly, after the exhausting adventure that we've just been on, especially considering the previous track, it's just such a relief. Oh, don't get me wrong though, this isn't a happy song. No, it's pretty sad, actually. Because all of those lonely nights down by the river were likely the result of the death of a close friend. Joanna repeats, "I'll miss your precious heart" throughout the song. One of Joanna's childhood friends unexpectedly died a couple years before the recording of this song, so it's possible that the song is about that person. And I should point out that the title of the song, Cosmia, in addition to supporting the celestial imagery that's present throughout the album, it's also a reference to a genus of moths called Cosmia. Joanna mentions hanging out with the moths at night while she's preoccupied with the death of her friend. And if you'll recall my expert level analysis of the album art at the beginning of the video, a moth is a focal point of the album art. Side note, supposedly, I wasn't able to confirm this, but supposedly there's a horse skull being used as a percussive instrument somewhere on this album. I'm pretty sure it's during the bridge in the first part of this song. Maybe that's a horse skull on the album then. It's all coming together. The song speeds up and the music gets a little darker near the end of the song as Joanna continues to admit her heartbreak, but she seems to believe that she'll see her friend again someday and at least leaves us with a little bit of hope in that regard. Yeah, so I really underestimated this album. I didn't think it was going to be an easy one to talk about, but I thought it would be kind of a cool challenge to talk about an album that I didn't really know a lot about. Given the lyrical density and my own unfamiliarity with Joanna Newsom's influences, this was definitely more of a challenge than I was expecting, but I really enjoyed stumbling my way through the vast musical meadow that is Ys. Even if it made me like really sad. This is my favorite album from Joanna Newsom. I think what she did here was incredible. I'm still not completely sure how to categorize it. I think chamber folk might be an okay term for it, but really I'm honestly okay with just calling it Joanna Newsom. I understand that I can't do this album justice just by sitting here and talking about it, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Thanks for listening.